and welcome to the Mad Writers Tea Party. I am here with some of the most fabulous women I know from Australian fantasy, and we're here proudly brought to you by the inCONceivable event and by Millennium Collectibles. And we're also having our tea courtesy of Ravenscraft Teas, but we'll be talking about that in a moment. So I am Traci Harding. I am a seeker of ancient mysteries and queen of time travel and all-round master of reality, and I will be your host. And now I am going to introduce the ladies that are talking with us today. Now, ladies, you've all got tea, I trust. So I'm going to see how long it takes you to recognise yourself from your description. And when you recognise yourself, just say hello and raise your teacup. Okay? So, firstly, it is known that she is a raiser of phantoms, a bone thrower, and seer of Mar. An astrologer extraordinaire. This is A.K. Wilder, a.k.a. Kim Falconer. Next we have, she is known as the master of pansexual dragons and cats, the consulter with ancient Chinese gods, and the arranger of tea parties in space, and fairy godmother, the evil one.
Yes, absolutely, that's me.
It's the wonderful Kylie Chan. Next we have the warrior bard who dances with fate, the mother of gorgeous puppies, and the heir to the seven waters.
That is me, without a doubt.
That is Juliet Marilia. And I have learned how to say your name after screwing it up so badly that night you won an Aurelius Award. I am so sorry, but I practiced. Did I get it right?
Yeah, pretty good.
Excellent. And last but by no means least, we have the Red Queen of Nevermore, the keeper of Little Fur, and the most urged scribe to hurry up. It would be Isabel Carmody.
That's me.
Yeah, she is.
I kind of speak for myself.
You do. You, that gives it away for me. Like, absolutely. Okay, so I'm just going to go around the table because this is a tea party and we've all got wonderful tea that we will be giving away with our book and tea promotion because we've got a pump going on. But I'm just going to go around. I'm going to start with you. Kim, what sort of tea have you got?
Today I have Ochi tea, which is from Ravenscraft Teas. It's utterly magical, but the tea blend is from the book. There's a character in the book who is pretty infatuated with this blend, and it's featured throughout the story in just a little kind of minor sea level line. And that's what I'm having. And I'm trying it for the first time right now, and it's extraordinary. It's so good. It's like a chai, and it's like no chai I've ever had. And it's got gold dust in it, so look out.
Fantastic. So who we got next? We got Kylie. What sort of tea are you drinking?
I had Sabrina at Ravenscraft make me my own tea because I'm not a big fan of fruity teas. I lived in Hong Kong, China for so many years. I got used to drinking Chinese black tea. So I asked her to make me a black tea blend, and she has added some colors to make it red, and there's shimmer dust in it. I don't know if you can see that, but it shimmers with silver through, and we have called it Blood of the Black Unicorn. So that is my Kylie Chan original blend, and it is just delectable, and I love the fact that it sparkles. All parts of the black unicorn are edible once the toxins are removed. So yeah.
And so that's where the hat came from.
Yeah, all parts of the black unicorn.
And next we've got Juliet. Juliet, what are you drinking?
I decided I'd like to drink a tea that's the one that my character Livon would have liked. She's the lead character in the Warrior Bard series. So she's a tall, she's just sort of physically the opposite of me, tall and strong, very athletic, lots of red hair. and she's not only a warrior, but she's also a wonderful singer and whistle player. So I looked through the range that Ravenscraft Teas had, and I chose this one, which is called Brave and Bold. It's a lovely, lovely tea. I do drink a lot of tea in my books. Everybody does. It sort of reflects my daily life. And so I've had to write down what's in it. It's a gorgeous, very strong, spicy tea, but with a deep, fruity flavour. And because Levon's got a voice that, while it's not described in the books as a rich contralto, that's the kind of voice she has. So we've got the warrior edge with the, you know, the gorgeous depth. So it has rosehip, lemon balm, ginger, orange, lemongrass, something called Chisandra, which I hadn't heard of, but apparently is otherwise known as 5-flavor fruit from China, cinnamon, and it's got shimmer dust. And yeah, absolutely beautiful, a lovely, lovely tea. So I will definitely be acquiring more of that.
And Juliet will be giving it away with her book when we do our giveaways. And the
Yes.
competition details I'll tell you about in a second. But first, from Isabel. What are you drinking, Isabel?
Well, I asked for a special blend. I said that I liked Earl Grey, but that I liked the idea of drinking weather. And so we talked about the possibilities of weather. And I thought the thing that was happening right at the moment when I was thinking about the tea was a spectacular storm. And I thought I would like to drink storms. And so this tea, as you can see, has many. I'm just going to show you actually how beautiful it is, the tea. Look how many ingredients it has in it. It's so gorgeous. I don't know if you can actually see it.
Mm.
And it smells beautiful. It's got black tea, but it's also got linden, and it's got lemongrass, and it's got bergamot in it. So it smells heavenly. And when you drink it, storms rise. So I have to be very careful about drinking the tea here, because I don't want to put us offline by creating a storm. If you want to drink the storm, that would be me.
So actually, hold on. I'll tell everybody what I'm drinking. I am drinking The Cake is a Lie. And it has cocoa in it, and it has blackberries and sour grape. And it's like eating Black Forest and drinking tea at the same time. So it just sort of saves you all that problem. You can just do it. So that's The Cake is a Lie, and I'm going to be giving that away. But the other thing I want to point out is that with this, with the tea, you get these little organic tea bags. Now, these are made of cloth, and you can wash them and use them again and again. And mine's got a little teacup on the bottom. It's just so gorgeous. And that's coming with all the teas. Like Raven's actually given us some of those to give away as well. So the actual competition, we heard the details just before, but what's going to happen is when everybody was talking about having tea parties at our tea party while they're watching our tea parties. So if you want to take a photo of you having your tea party with yourself, with your animal, with just at home, whatever, having your little tea party, we're going to have a post up on our inCONceivable, I think, Facebook page. And if you just post your picture in there, we're all going to pick a picture that we like, and you get to win a book pack and some tea. So that's how the competition works. And thank you so much, Raven, because, oh my God, Sabrina, actually, at Raven's Teas. Really, really good. Okay, so we have her to thank for our tea.
Doesn't she also have a stall? She has a stall.
Yeah. That's right. Nice point, Isabel. Oh, that's excellent. Raven will have a store at the con. So even if you don't win tea, you can go buy tea, stock up for Christmas, and buy all your friends. Like every one of my friends is getting one of those tea bags for Christmas, because I know everybody will want one.
I think I already got some extra ones as well.
So let's get down to business, ladies. Okay, we've all been doing this like a few years now. I just want to go around the circle, starting with Kim again, and let's talk number of books and how long since your first publication.
I'm on book 11, 12, and 13 is the new series. So 10 behind me. First publication was 2009. So
wow, yep, that's way back.
I know. It's way back. And yeah, it's been an incredible journey through several different publishing houses, different editors, different processes. It's been enlightening.
How about you, Patty? Where are you at?
I started in 2006. I started with that one. Am I reversed in your camera?
No.
Or is,
You're
that,
up front now.
is that around the right way? Yes?
Yeah, we can read
Yeah,
it.
I can read it. Yep.
Okay. All right. So I'll start again so Tracy can edit it out. Okay. I started in 2006 with White Tiger. I'd never written anything before, no fiction before. And I started with that one in 2006, and that was a massive 9-book series that I finished in 2018. And then I started on this 3-book series, and I just finished that one recently this year. So that's book 12 of full-length novels, and I've had 3 or 4 novellas as well, and the graphic novel that I did with Queenie Chan that she illustrated it with. So I've lost count.
Yeah, there's a lot of books. How about you, Juliet? When were you first published, and how many since then? Gosh, this is going to be a few.
I'm the great example for people who start late and manage to have it as writing as a second career. First published novel came out in 1998, and I'm now up to, I have 24 novels in print plus a book of short fiction, and another publication coming out at the end of this month, which is a little book of fairy tales illustrated by Kathleen Jennings. This is my chance to say woohoo to Kathleen Jennings for winning the World Fantasy Award for Best Artist.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so that's my, I think I've done slightly better than one a year since that first publication. And on the mantelpiece that way, whichever way it is, that way behind me at that end, are some new editions of my original trilogy, which came out from Tor Books this year. I think that means it's 20 years since they were published in the States. And
wow,
is that climbing up? Oh, it's a cat. So they kindly put nice new covers on them to appeal to, I guess, the new generation of reader. That really makes me feel a bit old, but that's okay. So I was 50 when my first book was published. So
wow. Well, that just goes to show, doesn't it?
Those who can do maths will be able to figure out how ancient I am from that.
It's like that. Okay, Isabel, what about you? When were you first published, and how many since then?
I think it's about 50 the last time I counted, but some of them are quite small.
Yeah.
And, or are picture books, so there weren't too many words in them. And some are novellas, so I'm counting novellas in that. And I started getting published, I think, when I was about 21 or 2. I was accepted. I was a journalist at the time, a cadet journalist when it was accepted. So it was a long time ago. It was the first publisher I sent it to, and that was Penguin, not because I was brilliant, but because I spent 10 years writing it before I sent it off. So.
Well, I think that's pretty brilliant.
Yes.
For me,
I worked hard.
you did, and you still do. For me, it was 1998 was the first, 1996, The Ancient Future got published. And I'd already written a few film scripts before that, but books-wise, I've done 21, just finished 22 for HarperCollins in the last, I don't know, I think I got published when I was about 28, I think. And I've just kind of been almost chugging out a book a year since then, almost. So we've all kind of been in this for a while. And being that this is the Mad Writers panel, I would like to have a look at, what is this madness that is the writer's life? Like, why did we pick it? I mean, really, who in their right mind would choose to be, especially a genre writer? But, I think a lot of us rode the crest of a wave in this country where genre was starting to rise, and we all caught the crest of that wave and have been riding it ever since. But, how crazy did people think you were when you told them you were writing a book? Now, Isabel, it might have been different for you because you were actually a journalist.
Well, it wasn't, I had never intended, I wrote it for myself, for solace and comfort. That was over Newton. And I saw writing as a place to go to solve the world in. I didn't really think of getting published. It never occurred to me that somebody like me could get published, or that I didn't even think about authors really. I knew their names, but I didn't think of people actually living as an author, because back in the dark ages when I started to write, you didn't meet authors. So they were the mystical beings, shining beings on another planet. I mean, I lived in the time when I could have written to Tolkien or you know, C.S. Lewis, and I didn't, because it never occurred to me we're in the same universe. So for me, the writing was really very much a personal thing. And it was, in fact, an editor who said to me, I used to write at work in between times when I was a journalist, and I was on night shift. And editors would sometimes say to me, do you ever think you'll get anything of that stuff you write? Will you ever get it published? And I thought, published? And then it occurred to me, I read a lot, and some stuff I read was lousy. And I thought, well, my writing isn't any worse than the worst I've read. So I much to my publishers, my editors' disgust, I quit my job as a journalist. I wrote my book one last time in between going to the beach. And I did that on $3,000, which I thought was a fortune that I'd saved up. And as I said, it was accepted by the first publisher I sent it to. And I think that was just because I poured heart and soul into it. I didn't think of marketing or publishing or readership. I thought only of what I cared about. So that was, if that's madness, well, it was a beautiful kind of madness, I think.
Indeed. I mean, I've always prided myself on being a bit nuts and a bit crazy. You know, if everybody goes that way, then I'll be going this way. And I really don't. I don't care. Everybody else seems to care more than I do, that I just go my own way, you know. So how about you, Kim?
Well, I think that's really... Pardon?
Did people think you were a bit nuts to be a writer?
I think they were just in general thought I was the weird one growing up off.
You're such a soul sister, really.
Think that? I don't understand. I just always lived in a fantasy world in my imagination, and it took quite a while for me to realize that I could take the stories that would go on in my head and put them down into this world, through the porthole into this world and into a manuscript. That took a while. And no one really paid any attention to what I was doing in that way. But I think something that Isabel said and that you've underlined is there's a feeling of not giving a rip what anyone thinks about your story or you. It is a very individualistic, almost, it's so self-absorbed because it's just you channeling this story. And it's only later that you start to think. I think the more I get published, the more I think about readership and expectations and what the editors want and all. But there's something so pure about that writing for just telling the story. It's beautiful. It's magic.
I've just had that experience, actually, because I think the book I've written this time, I think I only wrote because I didn't have a publishing deal waiting on it. It's a bit unusual. I didn't know how I would explain it. And if a publisher had picked me up, they never would have bought this book because I just couldn't explain it before I wrote it. It's only now after I've written it that it's just this beautiful thing that probably never would have happened if it had been all about the money or about getting published. It's not. It's about that book I'm obsessed with that I have to get out onto the page. Mm-hmm. So, and that is a madness, isn't it, really? That's being a bit psychotic. I mean, let's face it.
It's an obsession, for sure. It's an obsession.
We're all nuts. How about you, Juliet?
I was really interested in what Isabel had to say about writing a story or a book that's kind of to fulfill a personal need rather than anything else. I was an avid reader and writer right from the age that I was old enough to, hold a pen and make marks on paper, right through till, my mid-teens. And I had a really interesting time preparing for this panel because I had a look at an old box of document.
Oh,
Way back to 1960 or 1959, and done with illustrations. My mother did the typing. That one, Adventure on Mars. That was the second adventure, which came after the Adventure of the Hidden Fjord, which is about scientists going to Fjordland in New Zealand, which is near where I lived, and finding prehistoric life and deciding to leave it alone and not tell, which I thought was quite a good, conclusion. So I was into it very, very early. I have masses of those, but made a decision to study music rather than, well, there wasn't creative writing at our university anyway, but yeah, so that was my other love, was music. So that was what I pursued as a career. And for years and years, during being married and having 4 kids and working in a bunch of different jobs, a lot of teaching, bit of performing, bit of writing music, but not writing stories. Went through a really, really bad patch in my life. Marriage broke up, my choice, and this was when I was 40-something. And the story, which became Daughter of the Forest, my first published novel, was yes, it was a form of therapy, but it also was a story that was in there that was busting to get out, based on what had been a favourite fairy tale of my youth. But I thought, what happens in real life, these catastrophic events of the fairy tale, your mother, your father marries a wicked magical woman, and your brothers get turned into swans, and it doesn't just end up with a neat, happy ending, because people are scarred by experiences like that. They're not all going to recover. So it was less a fairy tale retelling than more an examination of going through trauma and what kind of people manage to become stronger and wiser, and what kind of people come unstuck, and how people can help each other, which is a sort of a theme that's been in a lot of my books since then. So I was working full time. I had teenage kids at the time, but I wrote that book over maybe 3 years, very part-time, in the evenings, over the weekends. Very supportive kids, which helped. And so that became my first book. And I knew zip about publishing. I didn't sit down to write fantasy. I had probably read books that were fantasy, but I hadn't thought of that as a genre. Never went into that part of the bookshop. So I thought, science fiction, that's not me, And so I sort of went into it just as an absolute newbie. I had a go at writing romance before that, and had got nice letters from Harlequin and people saying, yeah, we really love it, but it's got to be just all about the central couple. There's too much going on, or there's too many other characters. You learn. So that was good. It was a good experience. Yeah, so I was very lucky with Daughter of the Forest that I scored a 3-book contract on the basis of that book that I was so paranoid about that only one of my daughters had read it, nobody else had seen it. And I thought, well, if an editor tells me it's a piece of rubbish, I can take that, whereas, someone I know would be just too terrible. Yeah. Yes,
exactly. And that's the thing with actually having a professional read it, because, someone close to you might not see the brilliance in it. I mean, fortunately for me, my mother saw the brilliance of it, handed it to a friend of hers, Lynn Rainbow, who then handed it to Selwa Anthony, who became my agent. So it was a beautiful synchronistic. It was something that was just meant to happen. And I think with those kind of books that are a passion, that just come from the soul, they're the ones that are meant to be out. And it doesn't matter if you get fame or money or whatever, somebody out in the world needs that. And I found a lot of readers that need that. How about Kylie? There's a lot of readers that need you, Kylie. I know, because my brother was going to, commit Hurry Curry if you didn't finish one of your books.
Oh, no. It's absolutely hilarious, because the audiobooks of the Dark Heavens series, which I finished 3 years ago, the audiobooks are starting to come out in the US, and they're up to book 7. And I'm now getting more emails about where's the next one. And when's the next one coming out? Yes.
Exactly. I think you'd written 3 at that time, and Kyle's going, I know there's another one. There's one with the tortoise, he was saying. That's all I remember him talking about, this bloody turtle that was supposed to happen. And I'm going, really? And he's going, yes, she's got to write it. You tell her, you know her. You tell her she's got to write it.
I was not expecting to receive non-stop turtle gifts. And every time turtles appear on social media, everyone links me to it. That was unexpected.
So the other madness that is really associated with being a writer is just that that actually acceptance of yourself being a writer, like before you get published, are you really a writer? Are you a writer if you're not validated by somebody else? Because I know a lot of indie authors that are absolutely brilliant. They really don't need any validation from somebody else. But I think when we were having a chat about this, I think it was you, Isabel, you said that you'd read work, brilliant work by people, but because it wasn't of this time or of this age, or it wasn't going to be published, but it didn't make it any less brilliant.
I can't remember saying that. I guess I must have. Yeah, I actually can't. I mean, my feeling about publication is, I came from a traditional kind of world of publication. So therefore, for me, it was the only way, and it was the obvious way, and there was no one thought of any other way. There was a lot of, that was the only way you could go. Now I think there are a lot more possibilities, a lot more open doors for us to go through. And I'd be really willing to go through those doors now, where once upon a time I would have felt maybe concerned about it. And I think I've read great writing that I think will never be published because people didn't finish it. That may have been that's the bit that...
Yeah, that could have been part of the quote,
Yeah, that they didn't actually feel, they couldn't finish it because they didn't have enough faith in themselves. And I think if I was thinking actually about, as all of you are speaking about, what madness I think of, and I think the madness is the madness of having faith in yourself as a writer. The first time you step up and you say to somebody else, I'm a writer, without a silly giggle because you're embarrassed by saying it, that's actually really important to acknowledge that that's what you are for your own sake. And then you will finish things. I think it's very hard to have faith in yourself in general, but to do something as lonely as writing and have faith in it all the way through the process, especially if you don't have somebody like your mum who thinks you're wonderful, if you don't show anybody. And, the moment, I really felt the first time I had my own book in my hand, I suddenly was horrified. The first time I had I didn't feel what I thought I'd feel. What I felt was utterly exposed. Anyone could buy me. Look at it. Look at this piece of rubbish she's written. And all of a sudden, I just felt anyone could get a piece of me. It was terrifying. And I guess I feel just a little bit that way every time a new book comes out. So I think anyone published, whether they're traditionally published or non-traditionally published, if they've really written deeply, probably does feel that sense of exposure, don't you think?
Yeah, well, my first review for my first book was, even if you have to, do not read this book.
Oh, my goodness.
This came from a reviewer in Western Australia, seriously. And for me, I was a bit damaged by that comment. And then the same afternoon, I actually received a deal for a trilogy. And then I just had to laugh because I thought, this poor is going to have to read another 2 of them now.
Something I've noticed with us as authors is that all the very best authors think they're rubbish. They're convinced that their writing is awful. It's the ones who are supremely confident and are sharing their glorious words with everybody that aren't producing the really good stuff. It's people who are quite convinced that their writing is dreadful.
And every time you finish a book, you go, oh God, is that dreadful? And then you go back and you read it and you're going, actually, wow, this is pretty good.
Too bad.
It's like a reread, you just need to have a little rest and then go reread. That's my recommendation to people. Kim, you were saying that, once you fully acknowledge that muse within, then there's kind of no going back from that. And I actually think that's true. I think the harder you work at being a writer, the stronger those muses come through. Do we all have muses, by the way? Do you?
Yes, absolutely. Everyone does. It's a matter of whether you listen to them or not, or develop yourself I mean, there's the creative side, and then there is the ability, right? So the ability of the craft, whether you're a painter or a musician, Juliet, or a writer, you've got the imagination, but we need to gather the skills. As a writer, it helps to know some structure, grammar, a contemporary style of writing that, you know, most readers can read. You know, if you go back and read some of the older novels, it can be very enjoyable, but it's not contemporary, and it's not. So there's tools, and I found two things that helped me the most, making that transition between telling my own story in my own little inner love cave or torture cave, depending on the day, and being confident enough to seek an agent, to put it in front of publishers, to say, I'm a novelist, I'm a writer. And those two things, one was Stephen King, his book on writing. And he says a lot of things in there that I think are super helpful if you're an emerging writer, or just want some real insights into genre fiction writing. But the thing he said is, you have to treat this as if you are a writer. You have to treat it like a job. You have to go into at your desk, whether you've got your own den or not, if it's the middle of your house. You go there and you set a time. I'm going to do this many words. I'm going to do this many hours, and you do it. And you do it every day, and it's your job. And as you start to treat yourself that way and put it into your ritual routine, the muses love it because they have free reign during that time. You're not going to pick up the phone. You don't care what the kids are doing over there. They're at school, I hope. And, you know, so it's your time, and that part of you that creates knows it. And so it's this communion with your inner writer. The other thing that really helped me was that I took a Open University online course through Swinburne, the master's degree in writing. And it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work and a lot of writing, but you had what seems simple now, like 500 words due every week, and it puts you in the routine. There's an expectation, and the thing that all the instructors there would reiterate is, think of yourself as a writer. You have to believe it. You have to believe it before anyone else out there will. And there's a tipping point somehow.
Yeah, I've definitely, one of the things I tell emerging writers, it's like, how do I get people to take me seriously? It's like, you have to take you seriously. You have to say, no, I'm not here right now. My friends used to call me, and I go, hi. And they go, you're writing, aren't you? And I go, yep. And they go, do you want me to call you back? I go, yep. And, you know, they just got used to me always having my head in a book. But then all my friends used to come around and have me read to them. Like, they used to follow my stories and I'd read to them. And it was great to get that immediate reaction to things. So that's something else I'd recommend for aspiring writers, is that if you have friends or whatever and you're sitting around having a cup of tea, read them some of your story. And because when it's coming out of your mouth, the flow, there's something about, and you pick up mistakes in the text too, when the flow is stunted and things like that, when you read aloud. How about you, Juliet? What helped you sort of take yourself seriously as a writer, or what advice would you give to an emerging writer?
I think that what Kim said about the discipline of learning the craft of writing is really important. It's particularly important to self-published writers who tend to have, there's the great creative urge that we all have, sure. And for a self-published writer, there's also the business side of it that has to be attended to, putting it up online or whatever, and, doing all your own marketing and publicity and so forth. And sometimes the craft side of it tends to become less important. Having said that, I'm not knocking self-published writers. I know a couple of wonderful people who write first-class books, and the book is just like, in appearance and in quality, it's just like something published by a mainstream publisher. So, but sometimes, particularly when people are starting out, they do forget that you need to know how to write well. I mean, I do tend to just give the same old piece of advice, which is read as widely as you can. not just in your own genre, because that's a very enjoyable and painless way of picking up elements of style, but studying writing in some form, belonging to a critique book with a critique group with reliable partners, reading those wonderful reference books. Donald Mars's books are very good as well on the craft of writing. Really important. And sometimes it's hard to explain that to people because they're so carried away with the thrill of getting the stuff down on paper and then getting it out into the world that that step is lost. And sometimes the material that is out there is of probably far less polished and expert than it might be. And people then would probably wonder why they're not selling gazillions. For me, well, I had done, I'd not only been reading absolutely insanely since I was about 5, but also I did study English at university. So I did a music degree and an arts degree that had English and foreign languages and history. So that was a really good basis to write. I knew how to use language before I really, got started as an adult. Yeah, what did we start with? Did we start with talking about the news, or have we now sort of moved through?
Oh, that's a good question.
Yeah. Cover as multiple things as you like, Julia.
The news takes all kinds of forms, and probably the term news is a little bit misleading, but it's, the inspiration or whatever, it comes from in here and it comes from in here. But I very often have the sense of ancestral voices saying stories.
That's a very good way of putting it.
Possibly why I so often write Celtic settings, despite the fact that I was brought up in New Zealand and I live in Australia, is the layers of ancestry. And I know we're getting into an area that we're going to discuss later, but going to those places where my forebears lived, I feel those voices even more strongly, and I often feel, now I'm in the place where Leovan, Brock and Dow were riding when they went from, X to Y, and they were doing this, and I can see them riding across the field next to me somewhere in Ireland, or I'm under the standing stones and I can feel, it almost feels like the characters I've created were once real and I'm following their journeys. So, yeah.
I definitely had experience with that, and we will get to that later because it's a really interesting subject about, I think it's that, the matriarchal DNA. I mean, we actually carry our ancestral memory in there, and a lot of cultures actually refer to, like, when they go to sleep, that they're going to visit the ancestors and kind of brief and get debriefed, and then when you come back into the waking day, you've got that mission from your ancestors, and you're going through it during the day, and then you go back up at night and report to them, which I love. That was I think it was the Dagara people of Africa spoke about that, and I just loved that. It was beautiful. How about you, Kylie? Where do you stand on all of this, the news and taking yourself seriously? And
no one in my family took me seriously until my mother called me. And she said, your book is on the Dimmock's best-selling wall. I was in Dimmock's today and I saw your book on the best-selling wall. It was your book. She said, it was number 2 behind Jamie Oliver's 30-minute meals. And I said, that's wonderful. She said, why isn't it number 1?
Oh. I remember being number 3 behind the Bible. Well, actually, I was in front of the Bible. Okay, so we all write fantasy, and we've had real life mystical experiences, or at least I've had some pretty strange ones. And I actually wrote about one in Cosmic Logos, where I was actually in Scotland with my friend Susie, and we were driving over the Highlands towards Elendugan Castle, and we're coming over the Highlands, and this mist came over the car. Now, we'd driven through snow and stuff like that. We knew what snow looked like coming at the car. This was completely different. It was like electric. It had all these little lights in it, like earth lights I'd been reading about when I was researching my book, but you could feel like it was definitely electric. You felt really, and Susie's driving the car and she's going, oh my God, what is it? Do you think it's fairies? I'm going, I have no idea. But we were shaking so much. We had to stop the car get out, and like the mist cleared and we're on top of the highlands, and there's this rainbow going all the way across the horizon, and we were just absolutely flabbergasted by it. And fortunately we had tea in the boot. So we just stopped and had a cup of tea on top of the highlands and looked at the beautiful. It was just the most amazing thing. And I was just wondering, because I know you ladies have all travelled a lot, have you had any sort of spooky kind of weird things happen when you've been out there? How about you, Kim?
I've had some crazy spooky things happen underwater, very deep underwater, and I think that has fueled my compulsion to create this world where there is an evolutionary path where humans have gone that way as well. But that there's a whole nother world down there, and obviously, but until you've experienced it, it's just phenomenal, and it haunts me, and I think that's why I write about it.
The quiet is something you notice under there too, isn't it? It's so
just
quiet.
Your breath. All you can hear is your breath.
I remember the first time I actually snorkeled and like saw fish like right in front of me, and starfish and things move. It was just like to be able to just reach out and touch it. It was just like, I was just, wow, this is so amazing. But deep is a whole different affair.
Deep. You are so reminded that you're not top of the food chain anymore. And I remember being maybe 80 feet under, about to go back to the dive boat. This is off the Catalinas in California. About to go up the anchor chain to the dive boat. I was almost out of air. And a school of 30 blue sharks, probably, I have to speak in meters, 3-4 meters, really big animals, just undulating across this, it looked like across the surface, and they were between me and the dive boat, and my air was almost out. And that experience of, it could all end right here in this other world. It was profound. And
I will throw to you, Juliet.
Yes, I've had a few. The one that particularly comes to mind was in Burghead, which is the north of Scotland, and that was way back when I was researching the history of the Pictish people who lived in those parts. And in one of my, that's for the Beri Chronicles, and in one of my books called The Well of Shades, I featured this well at Burghead that theoretically was used as a place of human sacrifice by the Druids. And, you know, I don't believe a word of it, but hey, there's lots of stories about the Druids and about the Picts, that none of which come from the Picts themselves, because they didn't have a written language. So, you know, Roman propaganda or Celtic Christian propaganda. Anyway, I had to go.
Everybody was vomiting scum.
There was a scene in the book that took place in that well, which was around at the time of history that I was writing about, the 6th century. So I went there, little village of Burghead, very pretty, and had a lot of difficulty obtaining the key, because the well it's in the village, but it's underground. You go underground and it's down there, and it's gated off. I think I was there in non-tourist season, so, or perhaps people didn't go very often. I had to find someone's house and obtain the key, and so I spent a lot of time walking around. Finally got the key, so it was just me on my own going down there. So you go through, you open this iron grating, and then you go down a very steep flight of steps, and you're underneath, like in a cave. And it was cold. It was very cold. Caves usually are colder than, you know, the outside, but it was so cold. So I went down there and stood beside the water, and don't know what it was. It was just, you know, there weren't any sort of spooky happenings a la horror movie, but it was a chill vibe, as if it was just full of something very, very sad. And I wanted to stay, and I stayed long enough to see how it was laid out so I could write the scene, but I had to leave. And that was, just a really unsettling experience. So, I don't know what they used to do down there. Whatever it was a sad ritual of some kind. And yes, I built it into the book, and yes, I did have human sacrifice because that was part of the story. But I've remembered that place. I'd like to go back. I might go back sometime and see whether it has the same effect on me, or whether the fact that I was wrapped up in what I was writing made it more intense. But yeah, it was memorable, that's for sure.
I think even not knowing, you get certain vibes off places, especially like Scotland. There's like a ghost for every square little foot of land, and they're not afraid to tell you about them either, which is great. I remember going to a stone circle there where it just had like a little sign, like about this big, that said the stones, and we had to climb over a fence and everything to find them. But the feeling of standing amongst those things that were like basically raw quartz crystal, you almost felt like shook out of your body because there was just so much energy vibrating from the place. How about you, Carly? What adventures have you had when researching?
Sorry?
Have you had any adventures researching your books? I mean, I know you've been to China and Asia and all sorts of places. Lots of ghosts there.
The weirdest, Chinese believe in ghosts, and my in-laws spent a lot of time making sure that ghosts didn't inhabit the apartment. There's a lot of superstition that happens, and I incorporated that. But the weirdest thing that happened was, while I was writing the first book, the main character is the god of war, and his magical center is Wudang Mountain in China, where there are martial arts academies, and there's very ancient Taoist temples on the mountain. There's 3 ancient temples on the mountain, and of course I incorporated them into the story. I wanted to put my main character in hospital for plot reasons.
Nice.
Yeah, I was wandering around the house just mumbling, I need to get him into hospital. So I decided to have demons attack Wudang Mountain, but not on Earth, in heaven, the heavenly analog of Wudang Mountain. And I had it so that they burned down the mountain and he was put into hospital defending it. So the earthly analog was damaged by it, and I have them discussing how the heavenly and earthly analogs work. And then 2 weeks later, it actually happened in China.
Oh my God.
Okay.
Good prediction.
I felt a bit like, oh my God, did I cause this?
Yeah. Stop writing. Stop writing now.
I used a newspaper article about the destruction of the mountain and had the characters read from it, actually in the book, in the aftermath of what happened. That was so strange.
Oh my God.
Later, I went to Beechworth Asylum. I was invited by a horror writer to go and do a weekend workshop at Beechworth Asylum. And if you're into spooky stuff, I can highly recommend the nighttime ghost tours at Beechworth. We stayed there for a weekend, and they did up a lovely little homey room for me in the surgical prep room next to the operating theatre, where they did the lobotomies, because Beechworth Asylum had been operating since the 1890s, and it was only closed in 1996. The surgical operating theatre had been converted into a common room, but the medical sinks were still in there, and they set me up with a lovely little room next to it in the prep room, which was just delightful. They looked after me very well. They smudged the hell out of that area, so it didn't have the unearthly cold that Juliet was talking about.
Right.
But everywhere else in that asylum were so many, many, many people, because it was used by Melbourne to house the criminally insane for more than 100 years, and many, many people died there. These were people who were in padded cells. It was I think there were about 3,000 people buried there, and it was unearthly cold. It was very scary. Yeah, highly recommend going there just to feel the really incredibly spooky vibe.
Oh, that sounds like fun, Kylie. I think not. I think I'd rather go for our axe throwing date. I think that would be more fun. Which we are going to do. We're still going to do that. We should film it. Isabel, how about you? You had any creepy experiences while sort of traveling and researching and things?
Well, I have to say, I often get asked what I believe in because you write about these kinds of things. I have to say that I'm a fantasy writer because I don't believe in anything. And I want there to be things and I want there to be something. I'm forever fascinated by stories, but a little bit of me doesn't believe any of them. And if you'd asked me that question first, I would have said that. But the minute you begin to relate your stories, memories come back to me. I'll tell you just two things. One is Juliet and Kylie talking reminded me of when I was writing the last book in the Newton Chronicles, The Red Queen. There's an earthquake that happens at some point, and I had borrowed my friend's house, Christine Bonges, who's also a writer, up on the coast a little bit to get away from everything. I took cans of soup and didn't leave the house, even though she lives opposite the beach, and just wrote the whole time. And the day I was sitting down writing this scene close to the end of the book where an earthquake happens, as I'm writing it, I have never experienced an earthquake, so I didn't know what was happening. In fact, an earth tremor was happening. If you'd said on the Sunshine Coast you get an earth tremor, I just would have thought that wasn't so. So I'm sitting writing thinking, it felt like a truck had backed up to the house and was revving against it. And I just, what the hell? That took me a really long time. And then I thought, well, you obviously imagined this, because I find that when strange things happen, and I realize this, my own mind does this, even though I wish something wonderful would happen, something strange would happen, the minute it does, a little bit of it, it slips out of your mind. It's like your mind thinks, yeah, no, and pushes it. So that happened. And the funny thing is, my partner in Prague, the exact same moment, was writing a scene in a book he's been working on for 10 years. And we both realized, when I told him this story, that I'd realized it was an earth tremor, he said, did that happen today? And I said, yeah. And he said, I was writing about an earthquake, and it's a major event in his book too, which was published last year. So these two things, and we both thought it was entirely odd, but at the same time, I think, but it's just a coincidence. But the other story I'll tell you is, and coincidence is actually a lot more common than we realize. A lot of coincidence really is coincidental. So a bit of my mind always says, yeah, but, and I push it away because maybe it's a little bit scary to open the door on all that other stuff. Yeah. And another thing is, I was writing a short story for the collection Green for Metro Winds, and in it is a woman who is in a white dress, and it's about vampires, and she's in a white dress. And the reason I was writing this story is because I read somewhere, I was staying on Santorini Island in the Greek islands, which I used to do regularly. I read this house with these two doctors, and I was staying there at this villa, and coming there one day, I read a little piece in a really old, moldy, out of print guide, which said to bring vampires to Santorin is like bringing coals to Newcastle. And I thought, what? Because that sun-flooded, entirely white island. And I pass a church with the doors open where the sun floods in through the church doors onto the actual thing. So a lot of events happen with the doors open because it's dramatic. And it's fabulous, and it's so full. There's nothing to hide from, the sun. Why would vampires go there? So I thought, well, that's weird. So I wrote a story about this. And while I wrote it for a guy called Daniel Olson, and some of you may know him. He's a collector of horror writing in Texas. So he's in Texas, I'm in Australia. So I write this story, which no one's ever seen before. I don't show my work to anybody. I sent this story to him. And in it, there's a woman in a white dress walking. It's about vampires. And I use a bit of that. I write about, the character writes about that little guidebook that I was talking about. He quotes the piece in the book, like Kylie was saying with her characters looking at the newspaper. So they're talking about the actual event. And then I send it off to Daniel Olson, and he writes back, I threw my tea in the air almost when I got your story and started to read it, because on the same day, a story arrived from an English author who I don't know at all. I've never met the man in my life. He's a horror writer and I don't write horror, about Santorini quoting the same set of the
Ah.
book. And in it is a woman in white on an island, and it's Santorini, and it's about vampires. I mean, how weird is that? How could
That's insane.
I'd think if I'd read that book and my story, I'd think, oh, well, one of them copied the other one. One of them must have got the idea.
Really?
See, now I'm getting goosebumps.
Yeah, me too.
Okay, well now because we're talking about madness, and I mean I've had some pretty mad experiences when actually like researching my books. Like,
sorry, has anyone else lost Isabel?
oh
Yeah. She was there and then she's gone.
Oh, wait till she comes back.